Welcome to Inner Threads, a podcast on healing, wholeness, growth, and connection. Join us for shared insights and lived wisdom as we braid and weave together our common stories and experiences to help you along your own healing path. Inner Threads is hosted by Courtney Kaplan, Bert Nelson, and me. I'm Jessica Luke. I work as a spiritual counselor, and I'm the founder of the Well-Grounded Soul and the 1440 Health Collective, a healing center in Bethesda, Maryland. I support people through times of change, helping them reconnect with their intuition, personal power, and the wisdom of the natural world.
I'm Bert Nelson. I'm a spiritual counselor and the executive director of a nonprofit conservation farm in Western North Carolina. I'm interested in how spirituality, science, and shamanism come together to help us heal and live more fully as ourselves.
And I'm Courtney Kaplan. I'm a coach based in Oakland, California. And after years in the corporate world, I founded Iconic Leadership Coaching. My transformative coaching helps people create a good life, both personally and professionally. And I use multiple modalities, including emotional, physical, and spiritual tools to help my clients find peace and power.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to Inner Threads. So excited to be here today as Courtney and Bert and I talk about practices and rituals. And it's a really beautiful topic, and I'm really excited to dive into this. But first, let's start with our typical start that we get into, which is what is the inner thread that's really pulling on you here as we now kind of get into spring here in the Northern Hemisphere? Courtney, what's your inner thread?
Yeah, thanks, Jessica. You know, my inner thread over this past weekend and maybe the week before that was really experiencing almost that generative chaos of spring where everything blooms all at once. I live in the Bay Area. It was really unseasonably warm for a couple days. Everything bloomed in my life, in my garden, in my business, everything just like popped all at once. And for a moment, it's hard to navigate that. You know, it's easy to feel really overwhelmed or not sure where to focus or what have you. And I had a friend in town and she was visiting. We were talking and she went out into my garden and she picked a big armful of roses that had all bloomed in one day, kind of. And she put this big, gorgeous bouquet of hot pink and orange and red roses, which normally, I don't know, might not feel like that really goes together, but they were just really captured some of that chaos and beautiful energy that just seemed to like pop in the last couple days. So it's been a little wild and a little bit unpredictable, but really beautiful last couple days.
I can just imagine those colors. Amazing.
Yeah.
Bert, what's your inner thread?
I have been the last couple of weeks spending a lot of time working on the farm and getting things ready for spring. And spring is certainly moving forward. And it has really got me thinking about the interconnectedness of systems. And how when I, work on this little part of the farm, I think I'm doing this one thing, but it has sometimes a cascade effect of unintentional consequences. And so then I start thinking about my karma and like, what are some of the thoughts and words and actions in my life that I'm unconscious of or unaware of to, go back to what we talked about last time a little bit and really begin to see how as we apply pressure to one place in our experience, it has a response or a reaction somewhere else. And like spring is showing me that too. We had some really warm days and a whole bunch of trees started budding and flowering. And then we got like 19-degree weather for a couple of days and lost those flowers. But you can see how the plants are responding to the interconnectivity of things. And it just reminds me that I am a very small part of a very large tapestry, whether I'm thinking about like my fellow humans and fellow people or all other living beings or, zoom out or zoom in, gets real big, real fast. But it's been lovely to just be thinking about how my actions have ripples in the world and how I can choose to create actions that have positive ripples and see where those take us. And it's just been a beautiful blend of life. So happy to be here. Jessica, what's an inner thread for you?
Yeah, and it's a kind of a perfect segue, my inner thread to your inner thread and to Courtney's too. So I had this experience a couple weekends ago that's still really landing with me. And I don't want to get into the details of it, but it was this notion that how we can heal in community. And I've always been this believer pretty strongly that like everybody does their individual healing and then that's how the bigger collective heals. But I was able to witness a community that had been hurt in a way and how they came together and were able to heal together. And each were getting their own individual healings out of the group sharing and being together and spending time in nature and being out and watching spring do its springing and all the life and this life force that we're all really tapping into, obviously, this inner thread of just life coming to bloom. And it was such a beautiful experience to witness because I'm new to this group, but seeing how they could come together and just share. And it was an impromptu thing. This all was not planned, which is the other beautiful part of it. Something else was planned that didn't happen. And how everybody got their individual healings out of this collective. So I was shown the reverse of what my belief was. And I feel like that's what we're doing here with this podcast is bringing our individual threads as a collective to hopefully help inspire people, individuals, and watch that bloom.
I love that. I love that. I hope that people listening consider this almost a bit of a community that they can tap into if they're alone, kind of navigating some of their own challenges and healing and consciousness, that they can hear the three of us talking and relate and feel a part of something bigger. They're not alone out there doing their thing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. More community, the better.
Speaking of that, today our topic is practice and ritual, which is kind of related to this idea of community and cycles and systems. But specifically, I think practice and ritual is an interesting topic because I don't know, even the words practice and ritual, when we think about those, that those aren't words that come up often, especially in kind of Western culture. And I'm curious to hear, even when you hear the words practice and ritual, what's comes up in your mind? What is practice and ritual? And what's the difference between the two of those things?
I think practice comes up a lot in when I think about sports or, art, like a skill, music, and the practice that gets put forward there. You hear about a legal practice or a medical practice. And so those are some other ways that the word kind of comes to mind for me. I think about my own spiritual practice, and my practice is how I live my life. And that's a really broad definition at this point in my life, but it really feels that broad. My spiritual practice encompasses my entire life at this stage. But I guess to focus a little bit more on that, it's the doing of the thinking and the reflecting and the intention. It's the words and the actions that result. Ritual for me can be a form of practice, but it is then how the practice is brought into the world, into ordinary reality, whether it's just me and Mother Nature or me with my altars in this space, or whether it's a ritual with others or a ceremony with others, kind of acknowledging the importance of what's coming forward. So I use rituals a lot in my practice, but that's how I begin to grapple with these terms.
Sure. Sure. What about you, Jessica? What would you say when you hear practice and ritual? What does that bring up?
Yeah, just like Bert, I think being an athlete by nature, practice is kind of an athletic endeavor, or it's something that you're and the word discipline wants to come up and it's like what you're disciplining yourself to practice. And I think discipline can be a crunchy word for a lot of people. And it's not like, oh, I have to do this thing. And if I don't do it, I'm bad. So it's not a punishment form of discipline, but more of you have to have a disciplined practice to improve something or to make a change. So I feel like practices are these ways that they're action oriented. I just will kind of piggyback off of what Bert said. They're very action. I like what you said, Bert, about medical practices and things like that, because I hadn't even thought about it that way. But yeah, it's like we're your working your craft and you're working at it and you're continuing to put energy and intention and effort into the practice. And it can be in any direction. We have spiritual practices and mental practices and mindfulness practices and different things. So there's ways that you can implement those with discipline. And I love discipline because I think if you can find your way to that other side of it, it's actually very orienting and calming and structuring in a life that can be a bit chaotic. So just the discipline of committing to a practice without it being a necessary need for it to be perfect. You're just going to commit with intention to this practice. So that's my little musing on practices. But I think ritual is, I think about ritual and I feel like every single spiritual tradition has rituals in it. And it's because it's orienting and organizing, and I think it helps provide structure. And I feel like we put practices and rituals in this together because it is a way to build structure in your life, however you want to choose to look at it. Whether it's creating a ritual of lighting a candle and sitting down before you meditate, or starting a meditation practice, they're kind of the same thing, but it's just different ways that you want to look at it. And ritual to me, I also feel I want to normalize it because I think that's also a crunchy word for people because maybe it has those religious or spiritual tradition backgrounds, but we engage in ritual every single day. Brushing your teeth, your nighttime routine with skincare, your morning routine, making your coffee or your tea. Those are all little rituals. And when we realize that we engage with these rituals every day, I feel like it can start to open us up to being more intentional about creating those. Courtney,
I
what are your
love that. I love that. Yeah, I think that you guys covered so much great stuff about practice. And I would say a lot of times in coaching, I encourage my clients to think in terms of practicing something so that you're not going to step into work or step into your life the next day and be different, but you're going to practice something new. And over time, practicing that something new will create new aspects of yourself. So the practice stays the same and you are changing over time with that practice. And we don't talk a ton about that in our day-to-day lives. It's either you get it or you don't. And why would I need to practice to build a new skill? I should either be able to just start doing it or not doing it. And there is kind of that bridge or that on-ramp of being able to start to design something new in your life or commit to something new in your life and keep showing up on the good days, the bad days, the okay days. So like in the form of a meditation practice, people that are in a meditation practice aren't getting 1% better every day. You've got good days, you've got bad days, you've got days it doesn't even feel like you did anything, although you're sitting on your little meditation cushion. There it is. But over time, you're really building something that matters, that's changing and impacting you. And in a culture where we have a lot of instant gratification and a lot of transactional relationships, that idea of practicing something, even on the good days, even on the bad days, even on the middle days, without even knowing the outcome necessarily, it's kind of a concept I think is worth considering. It matters to do that. To do those things. And I loved what you said, Jessica, about discipline being orienting. That, again, in a world where you could kind of push a button and have something arrive at your door and kind of fix the so-called problem you have, being able to implement some discipline in your life can really help orient your efforts in a way that can be really powerful. And then ritual, yeah, I'm curious to do more of a deep dive into ritual, but in my mind, ritual is something that's a more special intention fused moment. And a ritual may have aspects of it that have more meaning or have certainly in religious practices or in specific practices, those rituals transcend over time. They're the same for hundreds of years or, across a globe, it's the same ritual. So there's something binding about ritual. And there's something there's a depth in the word ritual to me that doesn't quite land in practice.
To the discipline piece that's been coming up, and the crunchiness of it, I think that, Jessica, I'm so glad you named it, because so many people hear discipline and they think being disciplined, like getting in trouble, being penalized. And I think about discipline in terms of like fortitude, right? Like it's a strength to be able to not get pushed off your beliefs or your values by some external force that's throwing you, right? When you are disciplined and you wake up in the morning and you don't want to sit on the cushion because something in your life has happened that's upset you, the discipline is what comes in to say, no, we know this is in our highest good. This is a part of our practice. We know we want to do this, and then getting you to that place on the cushion. And it's so valuable. It is so valuable. So I'm glad that you named it so clearly. And Courtney, I'm wondering, when as you talk about practice and the repetition of practice, what makes a practice more or different than just doing the same thing every day?
I think doing the same thing every day is a practice. I think there are unconscious practices that we have, right? People might say, like, I don't really have much of a, I don't know what you're talking about practice. I don't have a practice. Yet they are doing the same things every day. There's just not an intentionality or an awareness of it, but they have those practices in their lives. It's just not helping them because they're unconscious about it. But if you can specifically say, I'm going to do X, I'm going to sit down and have 15 minutes of quiet reading time for the purpose of having a more intentional start to my day. I think that over time, with the same 15 minutes, even reading the same thing, you will notice that your ability to concentrate might increase. Your peace that you start the day with might be stronger or more evident. The practice itself sometimes is not even as relevant as just the consistency, right? I mean, I wonder, you could read a passage out of a book for 15 minutes, or you could mindfully sip tea for 15 minutes, or you could sit quietly and look at a plant for 15 minutes. I mean, there's a lot of things you could do for 15 minutes to start your day that may result in similar outcomes depending on what your intention is or what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I love that, Courtney. I always say, like, change is consistency over time. It's not perfection. And I think a lot of people get into this black and white thinking with things, and, it's an unconscious, they're unconscious about it. And then they punish themselves. There's the bad part of the discipline. But it's really, if you just keep flexing that muscle, right? Even if you're doing the same exercise, you're just flexing the muscle over and over again, whether that's an actual physical muscle working out or a mental, emotional, spiritual muscle sitting on a cushion, kind of centering yourself and focusing your intention inward. It's just that consistency. Yeah, I love that you said that.
I had to write that down. Change is consistency over time, because we hear change and we think, I'm going to be different tomorrow. It's going to be all different on Monday, on New Year's Eve, on New Year's Day. I'm going to change. And it's so rarely a one and done thing.
I had a session this morning, and the client was noticing how slow the change had been, right? And that there had been this expectation of, I'm going to get to that place. I'm going to get to that destination. And that's what the drive has been for long time of work. We've been working together for a while. And what's interesting is that they've begun to pivot how they're relating to their practice. And they're starting to see all of the benefits that they had been hoping to see through this like destination driven approach to spirituality. And it's just so lovely to see that happen and to see that recognition. And
Yeah, it's
yeah.
amazing. It's amazing. And I think sometimes I don't want to even say frustrating, but people don't expect change to happen slightly over time, and they can get frustrated. But the truth is, the time passes either way. Start or don't start, the time passes either way, and you're going to be, in one place or another. Apply the practice and see what happens.
And when you were talking, Courtney, about intention and the application of the practice, I feel like that is key for me, that the intention is what like empowers the practice. That's what allows me to get something out of it, to grow, right? Rather than just kind of staying flatlined. There's a growth. The intentionality is like directing that energy and that awareness. And that's what at least makes a practice for me enjoyable, is that curiosity.
Yeah. If someone was listening to this podcast and they're like, I buy it, these practice, that sounds like that's a way forward. That sounds great. I get it. I hear Bert, intention is important. Got that. What else would you think is an important thing for someone to consider if they're hearing this saying, yep, I get it. That's right. Change is consistency over time. I could use a little more discipline in my life. What are any other key things that you think help make a practice more useful?
I think it might be helpful to look at habits you have in your life, and maybe things that you're curious if you can change your relationship to. I think, what comes to mind is I hear a lot of people that wish they could stop watching TV or put their phone down and not be scrolling through social media. And those, I think you mentioned it, Courtney, like unconscious practices or rituals. And so I think first is identifying what are the things that you want to work on, and how do you want to set intention to do things differently, and then apply those, just consistency over time and discipline and building the practice and setting the intention that you really want to make a change. Bert, you're so right. I mean, you all brought it up, that intention, and we've had a whole podcast on it. That intention is like, a game changer. You get clear on your intention, and it can really make a difference. But I'd be curious, anybody else?
I mean, I would also add, like, the road to hell is paved with good intentions sometimes. And so I can imagine a world where someone is saying, that's right, I want to get off my phone in the evening. My intention is to have a phone-free life. And then setting up some kind of rigid practice. They said something about discipline on that podcast. I got to make sure I'm disciplined. Setting up some kind of rigid new practice that they're going to kind of dump themselves into. And I would offer with practices, you can also give yourself an on ramp so that it's not an all or nothing. Maybe I'll stay off my phone for an hour tonight, and tomorrow night it'll be an hour and 15 minutes. And that's it for this whole week. And next week I'll try again and increase it a little bit. So you give yourself a way that you can be successful in the delicate early steps of starting a new practice, so that because your success will generate more enthusiasm and confidence for you to show up again the next day.
Reflecting on that point, Courtney, I have found myself so many times trying to start a new practice or a new habit, and I spend hours or days like meditating and like crafting the perfect day, hour by hour. What does the perfect week look like if I could, blah, blah, blah. And a week into it, I'm like, this sucks. I'm not enjoying myself. I'm overworked. I'm missing tasks. And then I either throw it all in the air or I beat myself up. Like, you're not good enough, Bert. Why? You should be able to do this. There's that inner critic piece, that disciplining myself rather than being disciplined. And Courtney, in the past, you've talked about this reflection of what am I hoping to achieve by implementing this intention or this practice. I don't know if those have been your exact words, but that's how I receive it. And so I think flexibility is key when you're implementing anything new, thinking about what's the spirit of the thing I'm trying to do here, and then try some things, play, and that didn't work. No big deal. It didn't work. You haven't committed to it. You haven't said I'm an awful person if I fail, this one thing on the first day. Let it go. Go back to your intention. What were you hoping to achieve by implementing this new practice, and what are some other ways you might be able to do that? So that's how I applied that piece directly in my own experience. And I find when I do, really beautiful magic emerges in the space that I allow to be there when I say, this is what I want to achieve. And so, yeah, I didn't do these 3 things on my to-do list today. But if I had done those things, I'd be wiped out right now. My resources would be at 0. So actually, I did the best thing today by resting rather than pushing myself.
Yeah, I love, boy, Bert, when you talked about the Bert Nelson self-improvement plan of like tearing it down and making yourself the perfect schedule that you're going to follow from here on out. I have definitely been someone who has done things like that. And so sometimes it's nice to consider that a practice is something lightweight enough that it is possible to do it on the good days, the bad days, the busy days, the tired days, the enthusiastic days. That can be a useful, at least when we're starting, to say like, hey, I do want to implement a practice in my life. Well, let's make sure I have the capacity to do that practice.
Yeah, and that it doesn't have to be rigid or perfection or control, it doesn't have to control you. I feel like I
Yeah.
got that lesson last year, like a ritual, a practice that I had for a long time, like my morning ritual. It was almost as if my guidance, my intuition was purposely derailing me. And it was like forcing me to see that I was getting really distracted, or like forcing me into distraction almost. Like, it's time to change it up, Jessica. Like, you've been doing this, it's worked really well, but now how about we morph into something different? And had to be open because I got really rigid in my morning ritual, and I couldn't, like, anything that threatened it started to really hit me the wrong way. And then I was like, I had to actually really reevaluate what this ritual was and what this
Yeah.
practice was. So I'd be curious, have you guys,
I'm
what's your experience with shifting things and allowing it to flow? And
I'm living that right now and have been, Jessica. I mean, you named it exactly. That is how I'm feeling, and I'm feeling really good about it, actually. Like where now I'm at in the process. I can't say it was great from the start, but and I don't know that I have anything else to add to that other than I know exactly what you're talking about, and I feel like I'm in it now. Courtney?
I feel that there's a real, for me, when I am able to recognize and align with seasons of what is happening in the season. So in the winter on January 1st, I love to start to say, like, hey, let's get all geared up and make that goal, do the goals and reorganize everything and clean out all the cabinets. And that's not the time to do that. So a lot of times I'll start to like generate a lot of energy around that stuff, then say, God, I'm so tired. Why am I so tired? And it's because this is sleeping hibernation time in January. You're supposed to be resting. So if I give myself some rest, have some quieter practices or routines to allow myself to recharge, then inevitably on a day in March, a ton of energy becomes available to me and I'm really ready to go forth and change things, get up earlier, get those projects started, what have you. You know, again, it'll change around summertime for me. Summertime is about enjoying the long days, the beautiful weather, slowing down a bit in some cases, or, you know, staying up late and having a lot of fun because the sun is out so late. And then in the fall, I need to kind of start to ratchet it back down. So, look, I'm saying this as a concept that I adhere to sometimes. So it's something that I've found that's really, really useful when I remember, hey, that I'm actually living in a season. And that season can be a season in the climate where I'm living. And sometimes it can be a season of spring or growth or harvest in my professional life or in a personal chapter of my life. And if I can apply that idea of everything has a season and see what season I'm in, sometimes the practice kind of reveals itself.
Courtney, you were asking earlier what are some ways that we can develop practices or find ourselves within them. And I think the ritual piece of it is one important way that I do that, whether it's setting an altar, which is a morning part of my morning ritual, whether it's work that I'm doing to prepare to work with clients or to do a space clearing or whatever the case might be. I find that the ritual being kind of like an active, engaging piece, physical, material aspect of the practice, it helps remind me of the practice. So I see this altar every day. And if I don't tend to it, it's noticeable. Oh, I haven't been doing my practice. So they're like helpful reminders. I feel like the ritual can be helpful reminders or entryways or portals into developing a practice and finding one that works for you. So I didn't want to lose that piece of the ritual as an entry point into developing a practice and finding the fun and the play and the joy and the magic in that spot.
Yeah, and I'd love to hear more about rituals too, because we haven't really even touched on that side of things.
Well, Jessica, you talked about the morning coffee, and I love that example. What's the difference in a ritual and a habit?
that is a great question, because I would argue with myself that I have quite a coffee habit too. But I love coffee. Okay, so here, if I would just use the coffee example, yes, I set up my coffee at night. And so there's the habit, right? I set it up so that in the morning, it's in the dark, I hit the start button, I feed my cats. I then engage with the coffee. And that part to me is the ritual, because I add my little additives in it for my supplements that I like to add. And then there's something about consuming that warm drink in the dark, in the quiet, before I do anything else. I don't look at my phone. So that's the ritual around the habit, I think, if I can complicate the question you just asked, Bert, by saying that they're different, but they can be, that's how I differentiate it. Like, yes, I have a coffee addiction. I admit it, but I make this ritual around it that makes it part of my whole morning routine of something that, grounds me, grounds me into my day. And I think maybe a ritual is very grounding and centering. Like you were saying, Bert, to your altars, like you can tell if you haven't tended to them. When you can start to feel the energy isn't quite as stable if you're not engaging with your rituals. But I'd be curious what you guys say to the habit ritual conversation.
Yeah, I think that there's a very large relationship between ritual and addiction. I'm not saying you're addicted to your coffee making, Jessica, but when you look at people who have addictions, there is ritual that a lot of times they have, right? And I'll use the coffee example again as a pretty benign example. But, some people like weigh out the coffee beans and it's a certain kind of coffee bean and it only had to be roasted for so long. And then they grind it and then they have a special tamper. And there's like a series of specific steps that they take almost in anticipation of making the coffee and having the coffee. And those types of ritual, that also seems ritualistic to me. Specific behaviors, specific steps, a specific order things are done in anticipation of maybe an outcome or maybe pleasure or reward that comes from that. And I know I certainly feel that, certainly in regard to ritual when I'm setting a table for a special dinner or a special celebration, or I'm setting an altar with specific intention in mind, that there's some ritual of how the order that those things happen or the way I consider each piece that's involved that's beyond grab some candles, we'll throw those on there too. So there's some thoughtfulness that goes behind towards each piece or each step of the activity overall. And I think that a lot of times if you look at like religious rituals or religion and some of the, if you think about the Catholic Church and like rituals that they have, those things have been going on for hundreds of years. So even the ritual itself holds power that has been kind of gathered over time, over place, over a long time. So even rituals can be very powerful in themselves. Not just that you're doing it, but that the doing it has been done so many times that it's almost like compounded interests over time and there's compounded energy over time. So that doing that, setting that altar or lighting a candle or grinding your coffee beans has more meaning than just the specific activity because there's compounded energy behind that, which can be beautiful or can be dangerous depending on what your ritual is headed towards.
I think about ritual as the vehicle that carries the energy of the practice, like the structure so the church example. It's how you, Jessica, the coffee, the ritual is how you engage with the morning practice. It's the vehicle or the container. And to your last point right there, Courtney, not all practices and rituals serve the highest good. They're not all well-intentioned, right? They might not all be good things. People do lots of rituals, I think, to intentionally cause harm to others or themselves. And so for me, the difference in habit and ritual is more about the consciousness piece of it, the engagement with the act versus the going through the motions without even thinking about it. Are you listening to your podcast on your drive in on the morning, sucking down the coffee, not even thinking about how it tastes or where it came from or that, because you need the caffeine hit or you're going to be grumpy by the time you get to work when somebody starts talking to you? Or is it this like beautiful moment of self-reflection and sensory experience? And, that's the ritual piece of it. That's how those two things are different. And then the addiction piece, Courtney, is like, well, where is this energy going? How is it like being directed and what impact is it having? That's a whole separate conversation, I think.
Let's not get into that one, but it's true. And I think there's an energy component in that one too.
Right.
Right.
I was not raised Catholic, but I have been to Catholic services before where the sage is being burned. I asked what the purpose of the incense was. and they didn't know what the incense was or what the purpose of the incense was as it was moving down the aisles. And so for me, the question here becomes, what happens when ritual loses its meaning? We talk about ritual as a vehicle for carrying power forward and compounding that power. What happens when we lose the meaning to the ritual?
I think the power is still there, and that's the dangerous part.
Talk more about that, Courtney.
I think any religious organization that has a ritual and the people are there and saying like, yeah, I don't know what they're burning or why they're burning it or what's happening here. So they're unconscious, but the ritual is very conscious and has an intention. If you ask the priest or asked, the officials of the Catholic Church, they would give you a long list of reasons why they were doing it. So someone has intention and has kind of that accumulated energy or accumulated power, and someone else is unconscious and just like, I guess I'm just sitting here. And I feel like that is a combination that is, it's lost its meaning for someone, but it may not have lost its power.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Courtney, because I will keep going on this thread and not to pick on them, but they're steeped in tradition and ritual, right? So but I have attended a couple Catholic masses, and I remember the first time and everybody is saying something to each other, and it sounded so robotic. And I just thought, gosh, there's no like actual positive energy because they're just going through the motions. And it felt like the attendants of this mass were going through the motions. But the priest giving the sermon, performing the mass, was absolutely in his intention with what he wanted to deliver to this congregation. And so, right, I could see the difference there, but I picked up on it right away of, wow, these people are just going through the motions. They're just saying what they're supposed to say at the time they are supposed to say it, but without any real consciousness of what or why they're doing it.
And I think that happens in families sometimes too, right? Like you have, the way that grandma likes to do Thanksgiving, and you better do Thanksgiving the way grandma likes to do Thanksgiving. And everyone shows up and plays their roles and does their traditional things. And it's not really serving anyone anymore, but you're all kind of trapped in this agreed upon ritual.
One thing, as we talk about like an individual leading ritual, right, and the intention they're holding and the awareness they're holding of the ritual as they're bringing others through, I often experience ritual as a threshold. And as a practitioner or facilitator, I often, whether it's a wedding or a funeral or a christening, love that aspect of it, that the ritual opens the experience for other people to participate and step into. And as fellow practitioners, I'm wondering from that perspective if you have any thoughts or experience.
Yeah, it feels like you're offering an avenue of higher intention and engagement, right? To your example with the family, Courtney, right? Like everyone just falls in line with what grandma has to do and we go there. But right, when you offer an opening for people and you're coming at it from that really beautiful intentionality of bringing somebody into this transitional event, whether it's a christening or a death or birth celebration, there's that opportunity to really invite people into that and the energy behind the ritual, which I love how you say is like an opening, widening for people to bring in.
Yeah, there's an author named Priya Parker, I think, and she writes about designing meaningful gatherings. So, most of us, when we want to get together with family or friends, we would like that to be a meaningful experience, but we don't know how. And she talks about how to set an expectation or an invitation to create something worthwhile.
As I think about it, we experience lots of ritual externally, not just our coffee, our own personal daily ritual, but whether it's like the Pledge of Allegiance every day at school in the United States, or whether it's standing up for the national anthem at a ball game. Graduations are also, these markers where we're literally crossing a stage and moving a tassel from one side to another. There is this active transformation crossing that happens, and they are so full of power. And I think we can experience that fullness of power if we're aware of the ritual and how we're engaging with it.
Yeah, it's like those life initiations that we go through. We tend to just overlook them as just, a normal, yeah, you're just going to graduate from high school. And what are you doing for college? Right. But if we take a moment to really be in that transition. Yeah, I love that, Bert. It is really to mark those initiations that we go through more meaningfully.
Yeah. How do you design ritual or how do you incorporate ritual that's maybe outside of an organizational or a more traditional situation? What's a way that you design or incorporate ritual into your life right now?
For me, it depends on the purpose of the ritual. Am I planning a wedding ceremony for someone? I'm going to be talking to the individuals who are getting married. I'm going to understand what their needs are, their desires, their, what who they are as beings, to be able to open that channel and hold that space for them. If it's just for me, that's a different analysis, but I always meditate on it. There's a I don't want to call it a formula, but it's important for me to open a ceremony, to hold the container. If there's things that need to happen during a particular ceremony, then making sure that those things happen, and then a closing of the ritual. And that might be something as simple as lighting a candle, doing your meditation and blowing the candle out, right? It could be something much more complicated if you're looking at a wedding with a lot of people. And so um I start with trying to understand the individuals and the goals, and then I work with spirit. I connect with my guides. I journey. I ask for elements of the ritual that might be important, and everyone is different. So some are very nature or element, like earth, air, water, fire element heavy. Some are maybe color heavy or sound heavy, depending on what the nature is. But I stay open to it. I stay flexible to it. And I really try not to make it something that's rote, make it something that you're just filling in the blanks like an ad lib sheet every time you go through it. To me, that's what loses some of the power of the practice and the ritual. So,
Yeah, my rituals are, I prioritize physical movement in some way every day, whether that's, a little bit of yoga or weight training or going for a walk. But I always my ritual is in movement. And part of that, which I think I've talked about in a previous podcast, is dance. I have a little dance party for myself. At least one song. It's my um, part of the ritual is just to move freely and let my body move. My meditation ritual has changed and morphed, but I love it. But there's a strongly intended meditation practice that I get into, and it's really with my work container. It surrounds my work container, so I meditate every morning with the clients that I'm going to see that day. And I just find myself centering myself, getting grounded in myself, and then just asking what I would need to maybe know or understand, any insight that wants to come through about any client that I'm going to see that day. And then when I get to my office, I close my door, I clear my space, I set the room intentionally with a little opening ritual. And then in between each client, I do a clearing ritual. And then at the end of the day, I close that up. So I really bring a lot of ritual to my work life because I think it helps create a clear container for people to step into work that could be really deep and profound and healing. And it's important. And then I think the other part of ritual that just kind of popped in was honoring nature every day. And I guess I do that maybe a little bit of an unconscious ritual, but I often find myself when I go for a walk, I will be pulled towards a tree and I just honor the tree and I make sure that I give it its thanks. And right now I'm giving them all kinds of excitement and joy that they're budding and they're going to come back to life and show us all their beauty. So I do a ritual of honoring their beauty and the life force that they provide to us. But my ritual is there is not even a try. I do connect with nature every day in some way and a little ritual of gratitude.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. That's very inspiring because I've had a lot of rituals over time, but I noticed, like I said, this season, especially the last 2 weeks, a lot of that has kind of fallen by the wayside. And I'm thinking, oh, you know what? I'm going to let it fall and restore something new or create something new right now. So it's time for a little ritual refresh. So I'm very inspired by what both of you are talking about. Okay, is there anything else that comes up about ritual or practice that you'd want to share with listeners or that might be useful for someone who's um, thinking, gosh, this sounds great. I want to start to have some ritual in my own life. I need more. I need this in my life, some kind of ritual.
Do it.
Do it. Yeah, I would say do it and experiment a little bit. So I know we're talking about ritual and practice and all of that stuff. It doesn't have to be for a lifetime. You can do a ritual once. You can commit to a practice for a week. You can commit to something for a very short period of time, and then over time, maybe something sticks, or maybe you're someone that needs to kind of bring new ritual and new practice to your life in different forms over time. I certainly know I've had seasons where I have very strong practices and rituals, and seasons where those things kind of go a little haywire, and I need to kind of reset myself. So there's no wrong way to do it for sure.
Yeah, and I think starting small, like, you don't have to start with this elaborate, uh, making of an altar. You can, but it could be as simple as lighting a candle or on your walk, just setting an intention to find something in nature that resonates with you and putting that in a special place that you acknowledge every day. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big endeavor. It can be very simple and very small as long as it's meaningful and intentional to you.
I would invite folks to make it their own. So often I feel like I walk around the world and I'm told how I'm supposed to think or feel or what I'm supposed to do to be healthy and what pill I need to take to balance my vitamins and what adaptogens like all of those things. And it's real easy to recognize like I'm the one that knows myself best here and to not that I don't need to rely on other people's rituals in order to have a ritual or a practice of my own. I can make it my own. And it's fun. It can be fun to play in that way and to make your practice your own. But the act of doing it is the doing. And Courtney, you talked about commitment there just briefly. And I see this as a commitment to myself rather than a commitment to a particular practice or ritual.
Yeah.
I am committing to the reason I'm doing the practice or the ritual is because I am committing to be healthier or more mindful or more present or whatever the commitment to myself is. And so when I feel myself being drawn into that self-criticism, that self-judgment of you failed to do the thing you committed to do, no, no, I maybe the way I tried to achieve my commitment to myself didn't work out the way I thought it would, but I can be flexible there and I don't have to give up on my commitment to me in order to do that.
Yeah. That's beautiful.
I love that. It's like you're building trust in yourself through all that, which is, trusting your intuition, trusting yourself, and the more that you keep following that, that muscle will build and expand into so many other parts of your life. It's amazing, Bert. Courtney, what's your thought on starting a ritual?
We've talked very much in this episode about how intention is the real secret sauce here, and having an intention behind what you're doing is so important. And I liked what Bert was just kind of pointing to, that I'm doing it for myself. So whatever it is, whatever manifestation or setup that takes, the key beneficiary or the key thing I'm trying to do is to do something for myself. And I know, Bert, I'm not saying that like for only the benefit of yourself, but I know you're so generous and benefiting all around you, benefiting everyone and all beings around you. So I think if someone's looking for a way to start, I think you probably may have some places that are already going that you could build on. That's always one way to do it. If you have like a little figurine or a little something on your desk that's important to you, make a space for it, kind of dust off the area and give it a little space and a little consideration and intention around why you have that item on your desk or what you want it to remind you of or what energy it can hold for you. Simple as that, right? Or if you're out in nature on a walk and you just pick up a little pine cone or a little rock or something and just hold that for a moment to remind you of the beauty of nature and have that for a couple days and then put it back in nature and pick up something else. But keep it as simple and as joyful as you can at the beginning. You don't need it to be a complicated thing. It's one of those things where you want to be thoughtful, but you don't want to overthink it. Or you want to have an intention, but you don't want to like stomp on it all over because it's just not intentional and meaningful enough. You want to kind of tread a middle path there.
Yeah, and the thread that I'm hearing through all this too is just being flexible,
Yeah.
knowing when it's not working, or knowing when it's going to come in and out, and that's okay. Back to that consistency over time to keep engaging with it.
And I hope people start thinking about the rituals in their lives that they may have been unaware of now and are thinking about, what does that mean? What meaning do I want to bring to it? Those are not necessarily the same, but really powerful if we start thinking about those rituals we're already engaged in. Wonderful. Well, this has been an excellent conversation on rituals and practice today. Thank you both so much for being here. Before we close, I'm wondering what is bringing you joy today as we come to an end. Courtney, what's bringing you joy?
I have to say, just the springtime weather and the beauty of all of nature just exploding all at once. It's just bringing me so much joy. That big bouquet of roses that my friend picked, and then she even made like a little side container of rose water. She boiled some rose petals and made some rose water, and it's in the refrigerator. It's just such a lovely, it's beautiful in itself, and it's such a lovely reminder of my friend who was able to spend the weekend with us.
That. Yeah, I want to say, like, everything's bringing me joy. I feel so much joy in my life right now, and I want to be really grateful for that, for just the capacity to hold joy is bringing me joy. I was helping out in a class online over the weekend and watching people work through significant healing and transformation. And at the end of the class, everybody got a chance to talk. And what came out of it is trust, that they're trusting themselves. They're trusting their ability to heal. They're trusting their capacity to change. They're trusting their inner guidance and their intuition. And I have chills right now just thinking about it. So it just brought me so much joy to witness people healing. So that's probably the most pointed joy, but I'm joyful and I'm always happy to be here talking to you guys about these amazing conversations.
What about you, Bert?
My joy, I have a lot of joy as well right now, and I'm so grateful for it. Our nonprofit officially launched its online presence, its website, social media less than a week ago. And we have some Nigerian dwarf goats that will be coming to live with us in less than a week. And I'm getting their barn ready and building their stall. And it has just been such a lovely, joyful, exciting time to see things coming to fruition. And I can't wait to see where the farm goes from here as it continues to grow.
Can you give us the name of your website so people listening, we'll have it in the show notes, but just
brightravenfarms.org.
yeah.
So there's a couple of other Bright Ravens out there, but brightravenfarms.org will get you to our site, and you can read all about the different projects that we have going on there and read about how this philosophy gets put into action in life. That's how I'm holding the farm, is it's like the lived external expression of the values and philosophy that we talk about here. And so it's really exciting to see that come to life in a meaningful way.
So excited for you, Bert.
So exciting. So great to see both of you. Thank you so much for all your wisdom. I've got a page full of notes for myself for sure that I'm taking away from our practice and ritual episode.
Yeah, gosh, what an incredible conversation. And I feel like it's going to flow really well into our next conversation next time on manifestation, which I think, Bert, will be interesting to hear how you manifested Bright Raven Farms. So yes, join us next time as we dive into manifestation. Thank you all for being here and listening.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check our show notes for links and resources. And if you enjoyed today's episode of Inner Threads, would you share it with a friend or rate and review to help others like you find the show? And if there's a question or topic you have that you'd like to hear us address on Inner Threads, drop us a line. We'd be happy to hear from you.